Okay, so we're learning a Maamar we've learned before many times, and I was considering which Maamar to learn for Vayeshev because there's a few that we haven't learned yet, but this is a fabulous Maamar, and just felt it was something I wanted to teach again. So let's bring up the text. Okay, so this is the Maamar about Shir HaMa'alos B'shuv Hashem Hayinu Kachomim. This is on chapter on Tehillim. We say this always on the Shabbos or other times of holiday when we do the Birchat Hamazon, when we bench, is from Tehillim chapter 126. And it's connected to this week's parsha because this week's parsha we have, and next week's parshas, we have about the dreams of Joseph. So the verse says, Shir HaMa'alos B'shuv Hashem Hayinu Kachamim, we were like dreamers. And this is a psalm that's about the time of the redemption, that we're going to say that at the time of exile, we were like dreamers. So he explains like this. Hine, hachaloim hu mechaber shnei hafochim v'neisei echad. The power of the dream is its ability. It's not a necessity for every dream to be that way, but its ability, and it's not restricted that it could combine shnei hafochim, two opposite ideas, v'neisei echad, in one subject. I mean, the idea logic doesn't take place in a dream. The dream does not have an obligation to be logical. Umarkiv shnei yanim hafchim, and therefore it could markiv is not only that it could combine, but it actually puts together totally two opposite ideas. So just the difference in mechaber is it's to connect, and not just to connect, but also to integrate two opposite ideas. Hey, Danny. And when you are dreaming something, the dream could be that even though if it was in a logical situation where you were conscious, it wouldn't make any sense. But when you're dreaming it, it's as if it's one, and there's no questions. That doesn't make sense. Again, logic takes no place in a dream. So he explains. So what's the reason? Why is it that you could have two opposite ideas, and not just two opposite ideas that are mechuber, that are connected, but actually markiv, that mamish literally are integrated with each other, as if they're one? So he explains, that's because Bashena, when a person is sleeping, nistalik moyach haseichel, the power of logic, the intellect, hamavchin, that the part of the brain that's able to separate and understand, and therefore it's not there. The power of logic that could mavchin, means to recognize that this is not logical, doesn't make sense, is not there. So what remains? The power of the imagination. And therefore, when you have the power of imagination, right, there's no issue to integrate two opposite ideas. For instance, and he gives an example for those times, the idea of sfina ratza be'avir. A sfina, a boat, I'm not talking about an airplane, but a boat, in the system of a boat that's made to be on the water, and that's the whole basis, the whole logic of the boat is how it floats on the water. So it could be like Peter Pan. It's flying in the air. It doesn't have to make sense. As the Rambam Maimonides talks about in the first 8 parakim, first 8 chapters of the Rambam, where he discusses the idea of God's oneness, the idea of understanding creation. Where he talks about that the power of imagination, it doesn't have an obligation. It's not restricted to logic. So what happens when a person is dreaming? Rak b'shahakitz, when the person awakens. And what happens when the person awakens? The power of the intellect, the power of logic awakes and is functioning within the person. Hu hashaylit, now it rules al koyach hamadama, on the power of imagination. Meaning to say, what the Alter Rebbe is saying over here is, it's not that there's a single reality of a person's being, where when you're sleeping, it's just something fake. This is the whole point of the Maamar, really, that there's the power of imagination and the power of logic, and those two don't go together. When a person's sleeping, The power of logic is not functioning within the person. And therefore, what takes over and what's the consciousness of the person at that moment is the power of imagination. And the power of imagination is not restricted or limited to logic. When a person awakens, so the Alter Rebbe says, then koach haseichel, the power of logic, hu hasholit, it rules over the power of imagination and doesn't allow the power of imagination, hopefully in a healthy person, to take control, and it fights, so to say, the power of the imagination. If it doesn't make sense, if it's not logical, it says no, that's not true, because logic when a person's awake is stronger than the power of imagination. But it's not that the power of imagination doesn't exist when a person's awake, or that the power of imagination is false. It's a power, but doesn't have a strength against the logic when a person's awake, because logic is stronger than the power of imagination, which is a very interesting concept. It means that the power of imagination is its own world, the world of dimyon, the world of imagination. So we could mock a person who lives in the world of imagination. We could say this person's, he or she is not living in a real world. Things are not. There's no reality here. Doesn't make sense. Why? Because when logic is awake, logic doesn't give any space for the world of imagination. But it's no less of a world. It's just it's shoylet. The word shoylet is very powerful. It's not, the word shoylet means it's like it rules over the world of imagination, but doesn't get rid of the world of imagination. And its power of rule over the power of imagination, it doesn't allow the world of imagination to mix things, to integrate things. Means, what does imagination do? The world of imagination is a strength, is a power. And that power takes ideas and is markiv them and integrates them. A boat floating in the air and other worlds of imagination, other things of imagination. It takes ideas and mixes them together. That's its strength. That's its gravity. That's how it functions. When logic is awake and functioning, it will not allow for the world of imagination, the power of imagination within the person, to mix two things together. And says it's not. Logic doesn't allow for it. Lefi shiraya, why? Why is it so powerful? Why is the logic so powerful? Lefi shiraya bein sichle, because the person sees, so to say, with the eye of your brain, of your intellect, shem dvarim nefradim, sees them as separate things, meaning the ideas that the power of imagination are trying to combine. Logic says, how could you combine them? They're two separate things. There is no place for these two ideas to be combined. Okay. So what's this have to do with us? So the Rebbe says this is an amazing idea. This is the life of a Jew in the diaspora and exile. That nitzis elikus b'nefesh adam, the spark of godliness that's within the soul of every human. Shehu b'chinas sheina, at the time of galus, in the time of the diaspora, because of the situation of the diaspora. So it's the idea of the spark is asleep. And with the idea of sleep comes that the power of the brain, the logic, is not functioning properly. And therefore, a person could live a life, in the life of diaspora, that maybe in the times of temple would be, what's going on? There's a contradiction. How are you living this way? How could you be 1 minute like this and 1 minute like that? It's a contradiction. Your life is a contradiction. But in the time of Galus and diaspora, where the power of the spiritual logic is not there, a person could combine in their reality from the world of imagination that has the power to combine things, will combine two opposite ideas. And he gives an example. This is what he's talking about. That a person, in one side, a whole day, he or she is toiling and trying to make a living. Masa mata means to make a living. Each person trying to go to their business, to their job, and to maximize return, to do the job fully. They're totally invested in the physical and how to get further on in life. This person turns to his or her olive tree as an idea of as a source of income, and that's your whole focus, your whole drive, your whole excitement. Every inch of your brain is invested in how to make another deal a little bit more successful, things that are around material. Hagam, and then you have the other side of your day. Shebetfila, when you were davening an hour before. You were davening to the extent that the love that you felt at the time for God was so strong that your only desire was to unclothe yourself from the restrictions, from the garments of this world, to only cleave to God. All these ideas of business and wants and drive and competition didn't even exist in that when you were davening. Your whole focus was to cleave to God. What was the fuel for that desire? Is when you contemplated the oneness of God on a higher level, total nullification, and the lower level of unification. The idea of Baruch Shem K'vayid Malchus El Anvar, the idea of Bittul Hayesh, nullifying any kind of entity of your existence. That was your whole focus. That was your whole your whole mitzias, your whole being was your cleaving and desire to become one with God. Nothing else mattered to you when you were praying. Alpha became then, nevertheless, what happens? Acher Tefillah, when you leave the shul, you leave the moment of prayer, automatically out of nowhere, Chaylefes Vayveres Ava. Chaylefes means, from the word, it exchanges to love other things. It means the power of love was ignited. And the Rebbe always talks, the Alter Rebbe talks about in the Maamar, that once you ignite an emotion, it doesn't just disappear and go dormant, it attaches itself to something else. So it's chaylef, it's exchange. Vayveres, and it moves over. Ha'ava, the love. No longer are you loving and want to just cleave to God. All of a sudden you're obsessed and loving about your life and your success and what matters to you and your covered and your honor. And you absolutely don't pay attention. You don't apply to your heart. That what you're driven by now, 10 minutes, an hour, 28 minutes after you left shul, all of a sudden you grab your phone and you start working and you get excited about business. And it's not just that you're trying to earn a living so you can be able to serve God. You're really invested and motivated by the success itself. And you don't even pay attention. How it's totally opposite how you were feeling while you were davening. It's a total contradiction. It's the world of imagination. And you're trying to imagine in your heart that you're literally trying to combine two opposite ideas. Where in one side in the davening, you're all you want to do is unclothe yourself from anything worldly material. Your whole focus is how you cleave to God, loving God. And all of a sudden you go out and it's totally chaylefes, it totally separates, it exchanges a total love for something else. And you're not even paying attention to the contradiction. And you'd think you could combine them as if it's one idea. But if you had a spiritual logic, your logic would say, it doesn't make sense. Who are you? Where's this? It's a contradiction. It's the world of imagination. The person doesn't say, 1 second. What do you want from me? The Torah says, the Torah demands that I go out to work. The Torah says that in the 6 years, so to the 6 days of the week, the 6 years of the sabbatical, go out and plant your field. And also when we daven, it says, even in the Shema itself, when we're feeling the love for God, we connect it to Vasafta de Ganecha, you're going to gather in your grains with the idea of success in business. But here he says, okay, the Rebbe seems to say that this is a little bit of a mistake in the words. Uvda would mean it's just a fact. But the Rebbe says the word's supposed to be avoida. The idea of the 6 years of working in toiling is what the Torah wants from you, is how you do it in a way of service, in a way of avoda, how you further your connection to Hashem. Ki yadua, as is known, if you properly pay attention to why am I working, what's the purpose of me working as a way of serving God, that's one thing. Yes, because that's what Hashem wants. There is a way, of course, to serve God in the workplace. 100%. God says to go out and work. Sheishanim Tizra, go out 6 years and plant the field. Ubashana Shviz, in the 7th year is the sabbatical. V'inin habirurim, and the idea of the avoda is that when you engage out in the world, you're able to refine the world, utilizing either your success for Torah mitzvahs, or actually while you're doing business, finding pockets of time to turn those moments into godliness, inspiring someone else, teaching, learning, saying Tehillim, davening. But that's all how you're integrating. Your whole focus of the work is ways of elevation, ways of finding sparks and furthering your service of God. And all ideas that when you take the 6 years, you bring it to the 7th year and elevate it like the 6 days of the week, that gets aliyas ha'olamos, the worlds get elevated on the Shabbos. And that's if you have, that's your kavanah, that's your intention. So then that your heart is connected to servicing God in the 6 days of the week, in the time of business. But that's only if that's true, if that's who you really are. That while you're out in the work, that's your focus, that's your drive. But the Alter Rebbe says, let's be practical. Most people, the hamoin, the majority of the people, what's their drive is just to be able to earn a living. Not through the being in business, you have an opportunity to do avoda, to do service. Levavim like dama. The heart is not the way we're saying that it should be, in a way that a person is just trying to serve God. V'libam le'nachan, and the hearts are not correct. Al pi hakavana haruya. People are not focusing. They're not. They're out saying, let's be honest. Who are we fooling? Who goes out there to work and says, this is my way of doing avodas Hashem? There may be individuals that do that, but the majority are driven by success for itself and what success brings in their life. Happiness, stability, financial stability, etc. What is the whole hope and desire? It's to fulfill their physical needs, what they're lacking. We go out, if you get a phone call from the bank that you have to pay your mortgage, then your drive to earn a living is to pay the mortgage. He's not saying anything's wrong with it. The Alter Rebbe is saying, you're not looking to, we're not even talking about a person who's looking to live a luxury life specifically. Yeah, you're just trying to feel the things that you're machzor, that you're lacking. But at the end of the day, that's your focus. I have responsibilities, I have to pay bills. Asher yechzer lehem, what you're lacking. B'tzarchei gufam, in your physical needs, your bodily needs. V'oisim b'tzarchei aguf ikar. And what is your focus? What is your ikar? Ikar means what is the primary reason for you going out there? Even if you have a secondary understanding that there's avodas Hashem, but your primary reason, what gets you out of bed, what makes you to excel in your work, is that at the end of the day, it helps my success. And the success doesn't have to be, the Alter Rebbe is not saying it's not just, again, to have a luxury life, but even to have the bare necessities, even to have just a comfortable life. Again, nothing's wrong with that, but it's a contradiction to the feeling of that my whole existence is only to serve Hashem. My whole existence and the only want I want. Mamish, today's Hayom Yom. The Rebbe finishes off his book on the day-to-day teachings of Chassidus that the Rebbe authored in 1944. The Alter Rebbe finishes off today, because today we finished the Hayom Yom. The idea that the Alter Rebbe says, the idea that the Alter Rebbe says that I don't want your Garden of Eden, I don't want your world to come, I only want you, and that's a very high level. Not only don't I want that I should be able to pay my bills, or should I have day machzorim, I have what I need. I don't want anything. I only want you. That's the highest level. So the Rebbe says, Alter Rebbe is saying over here. So this idea that a person sometimes feels that, and the Rebbe says the very fact that we have that teaching from the Alter Rebbe, handed over from the Tzemach Tzaddik, from his grandson, and the Rebbe really quoted it many, many times. In all the Rebbe's talks, we find this idea, was that the Rebbe felt that although that sounds very high and lofty level, the level of the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, the author of the Torah, or that we're learning now, but the very fact that we know it means that we could in some way reach it. But if we're reaching that level, how does that have to deal? How's that consistent with the reality that we go through most of our time, which is all about trying to be successful, trying to get through in life, and the focus is to get through. That mitzarchei guf ikar, that my material needs is number one. And of course, if God, everyone says, if God provided for me in a way that everything would be comfortable, then I would really dedicate my time to Hashem. But the Alter Rebbe is saying, but until there, what about until you get to your comfort zone? The Alter Rebbe says that this is a total opposite of how you felt during davening, when you really felt just godliness, just cleaving to God. That was your whole desire. Your whole focus, your whole drive in life was godliness. And here you go out to the world and it's not like that. That during davening, what was nikva, what was established in your heart was only your love for God. Levada, only. That was the only thing you loved. Nothing foreign, God forbid. And so the Rebbe says, so that's a contradiction. And that's the idea of Gullus. The idea of Gullus is the idea of the world of imagination. Again, like we said before, Rebbe Shimon, we learned this Maamar many times, that what we said before is that it's not that the world of imagination is false, and that's what he's going to get to. There's the power of imagination, the power of logic. But the power of logic is shoilit. When it's conscious and awakened, it's shoilit. It doesn't allow for the world of imagination to function in the person. It doesn't leave that freedom for, but imagination on its own is not the contradiction. Imagination can create the contradiction. It's not the same thing. It means the world of imagination gravitates where the world of logic is only about separating the logic. This makes sense, this belongs here, this belongs there. The world of imagination is all about combining ideas. Markiv, it's going to combine ideas. That's its energy. And when logic is awakened, like the Alter Rebbe says, it's shoilit. It rules over the power of imagination. Not that the power of imagination doesn't exist, but the logic is stronger than the power of imagination when the person's awake. Now, the Rebbe says, he continues, so a person's now reading what the Alter Rebbe says. The person possibly feels bad about themselves. Says, what kind of life am I living? Am I living in this false world? This world of imagination? So the Rebbe says, no. Even after I said these true words, because it's true. Logic says this is the truth, that it's a contradiction. So a person shouldn't have that their heart falls and they say to themselves, so what's my conclusion? If logic says it's a contradiction, it means to say that if one of them is not real, it's my love for God. Why? Because you know, honestly, that if you the love for God, you have to you're powering forward upwards. You're climbing difficult mountains, where the power for success or the power for covering your needs is automatic. The drive you have to go to invest in your success or for the things that you need, you don't have to put in the same effort. You don't have to make the same arguments. You don't have to contemplate for 40 minutes before davening to build a case to love yourself, to love the things that you need. It's automatic. It goes into auto mode. Whereas loving God, you knew that you had to build up to it, and you saw how hard it was to build that love for God. So what do you say to yourself? Which one is fake? The one that's so hard to achieve. So a person may say, that these feelings that I had during davening, and I had to be zbonenus and I had to contemplate. And it was imagination. I thought I loved God. I don't really. How do I know? Because how easy I could love other things. The Alter Rebbe says, don't feel bad. Why? Because we live in the life of the dream. And in the dream, the world of a dream, there's no logic. And when there's no logic, yes, there are two ideas. Again, the imagination is not so much the power to create the two ideas. The imagination is the power to combine the two ideas. And this that you may seem like a contradiction is only contradiction in the world of logic. But in the world of imagination, which is a world, and the Alter Rebbe is going to say it's a very holy world. It's not a contradiction. That because you could love Hashem 100%, and even though it doesn't make sense, but you still love yourself 100%. You love not yourself, meaning to say, but you love that your needs 100%. The very fact that a person sees after you daven that the love is no longer there for God, and in exchange for the love for the things that you need. And you start to love your body, things that you need. A person may think that, what do you see clearly? That when you were davening, you really never stopped loving yourself. And therefore, my love for God was never real. But it's only, the truth is, it's like in the world of a dream, where it can combine two opposite things. That you think you love God, but you really love your body. The logic would say they can't go together. But the fact is, the Alter Rebbe says, that in the world of imagination, it's not a contradiction. Because this ability to be functioning like this seeming contradiction is only in the world of logic. But the power of the world of imagination is that it doesn't just have two ideas, but it combines two ideas. You can imagine things that don't make sense. Shav means almost wasteful. The Alter Rebbe says, you may not understand this, and that may not make sense to you. Because when you're awake, you're thinking from the perspective of logic, and after it's been told to you black on white, in clear writing, and you say, look, the Alter Rebbe is right, but that's if you see the world of logic as the only world. But the Alter Rebbe says, but the world of the chalom, the world of the dream, Yisaydasei B'Har Kodesh, it has a foundation in the great realms of holiness. And what does this mean? Reuven will understand what it says in Zechariah. The prophet Zechariah says, Bayemahu, on that day, meaning the day when Mashiach comes, Yi Hashem echad u'shmo echad. God will be one and His name will be one. Uparach b'Gemara, the Talmud asked the question, Atu ha'idna lav shmo yechadu. What, only when Mashiach comes, His name will be one? Today, His name is not one. Umashane, in the Gemara responds, Loi k'shani nichtav ani nikra. We write God's name in one way. We don't pronounce it that way. We know we're not allowed to pronounce God's name. So though we write it Yud and then the Hey, and then the Vav and then the Hey, when we pronounce it, we pronounce Adonai. So he explains, Va'inyan. What does this all mean? Gishmoi, what is a name? Hu b'chinas galus, the name of God in exile, in the time of exile, is itself in exile. So what does it mean it's in exile? The name has been exiled. We have no ability to pronounce the name properly. It has to be placed in a garment of the word Adonai. And like we said before, that the idea of galus is like the time of a dream, of a sleep, when a person's sleeping. And when a person's sleeping, the mind, the power of logic elevates. So where is your soul drawing energy from, if not through the mind? It's drawing energy from the world of circular. What's the world of circular? In the circle, there's no top and bottom. Logic needs a starting point and an end point. Part of the world of logic, Alter Rebbe is going to say, is the world of lines, kavim. Here's a starting point, here's an end point. Logic needs to have a starting point. But in a circle, there's no starting point. And when you're sleeping, you're not drawing from the world of logic, which is the world of lines. You're drawing from the world of circles. And there's no top and bottom, and therefore there's no restriction to logic. Rak hakol b'hashva achas, everything is equal. Because a circle, anyone, a circle table, everyone's sitting at the head. Obi hiskalus, and everything coexists. Vis achtus, and there's a oneness. Kol and yana blishum per vischalkus. Everything is together without any separation. K'noidim Rizal, like this idea, which everyone asks. We have in our shmooze, right? Everyone says, but what is the law? We have one opinion that says A, it's kosher. The other opinion says it's not kosher. Which one is it? Is it kosher? Is it not kosher? And what do we say? Eilu ve'elu divr l'kim chayim. Both the opinion of yes and the opinion of no are both the word of living God. So in the world of logic, you say, well, that doesn't make sense. How could they both be the world of living God? Either it's kosher or it's not kosher. But the world of logic is the world of lines. But in the circle, everything's together. And there could be both opinions, and both of the opinions of the living God. But when things have to come through lines, kavim is a line, then the lines by definition separate things. And not just that the line has a top and bottom, but there's also different lines. Kav yamin is the right side. Means to say, if you were to open a circle, right? And you have a circle, so the circle obviously it has in it, the circle is much longer than the line. If you were to take a circle and measure from top to bottom, you'd get so amount. But if you open the circle, it's almost 3 times the amount. So if it's a full circle, so if you were to cut that into 3 pieces, so then you have 3 different lines: Chesed, Gvur, and Tferes. Chesed is separate, Gvur is separate, and Tferes is separate. Right, left, and center. But if you combine it all, then it's a single entity. But in the world of kavim, as yeshes chakas kav yamin, then there's the right, which is chesed, kindness. The left is severity, and the middle is the idea of tiferes, coexistence. That's only the world of lines. But if everything is circular together, ein shem is chalkas klal, then there is no separation. And where Beis Shammai, the house of Shammai, leaning towards severity, would say something is non-kosher. The house of Hillel, that's leaning towards the world of Chesed, will say it is kosher. But if you put it all together, they're both the word of living God. Here, in our world, where it's the world of lines, where they're separate, and in the world of circle, it's all one. You don't see any separation. And therefore the dream, that's what he's saying, the dream, its foundation is holy, because it's drawing from the world of the circle, not the world of the line. The logic doesn't take place there. And therefore, what the Alter Rebbe is saying is, it doesn't mean you don't have to work on yourself. And therefore you could say, oh, perfect, I'm going to live a life of a contradiction, a spiritual contradiction. I'm going to daven, I'm going to really feel it. I'm going to go on and I'm going to really feel my need to get a Ferrari. And it's not a contradiction because I'm drawing from the world of circle. No, the fact is we have to try to be awake and find logic, but it's not a contradiction when it's out of your control. It's not a contradiction, meaning to say, in your honesty, when you're trying to be, you're fighting that reality. But so even though the reality exists, it's not a contradiction. But how can we today tap into that energy of the circle? And this world is the world of the lines. Is only that's only specifically in the time of the exile. When part of the consequences of the exile is where the spiritual logic is no longer awake. So therefore, we're like sleeping, Shena, we're sleeping. And the intellect has left and gone into exile. So therefore, but the silver lining is that we can get into touch with the circle. Like it says in Yeshaya, Al b'shamayim kadrus, that the heavens hid themselves in darkness. And in that darkness, in the world of, when something's dark, it's when the lights are on, you know where everything is. When everything's dark, things are dark, it's dark. So it's dark. I can't see anything. That the world of the circle, which is the heaven, is it's in darkness. And therefore the darkness also conceals that there is no logic there. Or the darkness is the fact that there is no logic. Which is concealment. And therefore, what is functioning? The world of the circle. Like a dream. And like I said before, the world of imagination is not a false world. It just doesn't go together with the world of logic. And when logic is awake, logic is stronger, it's shtoilet, rules over and does not allow for the power of the imagination. Says, no, doesn't make sense, it's a contradiction. But in the world of the chalom, you have the world of the imagination. And therefore, you could be mechaber shnei hafachim. Beis Shammai says kosher, says pasul. Beis Hillel says kosher, and they're both the word of the living God. Two opposites in one subject, even though it doesn't make sense logically, but you could have in the world of a dream, it combines. Again, the power of the world of Madam is not just that it allows for contradictions, it creates the contradictions. The Fisha Be'emes, again, because the Alter Rebbe says that the truth is, B'sharshim, and the root of things. Because again, we live in a world, God created the world to be logical. God created the world to be specific. The whole point of the world of Bria is separation. Separating is, we think separation comes from positivity, the ability to have logic, but logic itself is a creation. Chachma, Bereshis. Chachma, where logic is in Chachma, God's wisdom. Wisdom is a creation. Yet if the creation ever happened, so who says there has to be logic? Because if you go to its root, things are combined. Because they're in circles, like it said before. Only the way things comes down to our world. As the world starts to come into structure, when things get separated, pi hachachma vadas meaning to have alpi, that everything has to run according to chachma, wisdom, v'das, and law, and logic. And the chachma separates things, wisdom separates things. This has to be, this place is here and this place is there. And not only doesn't it work, it looks like a contradiction. She said, how could you have two things that are opposite? The logic pushes them away. This is yes and this is no. Chachma does not allow for coexistence on its absoluteness. It only could, when you have Tiferes, is only balance. Chachma doesn't require that you could be only extreme, but it requires a balance. When you have Tiferes, it has to be balanced. It has to match. It has to be a combination in a healthy way. When Yaakov's world different than Esav's world. It's not just that Yaakov's world is the world of fixing and Esav's world is the world of chaos. Yaakov, when he dimmed the lights, he was able to create the pixels, he was able to create the patterns. But by definition, patterns have to go together. Chachma says, yes, of course, there's times you have to be kind, and there's times you have to be gvur, you have to have severity. And not always are those times, and you have to have balance in your life. You shouldn't always be chesed and always be gvura. But actually, chachma is controlling when's the right time to have chesed, when's the right time to be hugging, and when's the proper time to sometimes distance yourself. Because chachma understands, it's trying to figure out when are the right times for these things. So it's managing it. So it shouldn't be a contradiction. And it shouldn't be extreme. It has a big job, chachma. But if you pull chachma out, Chachma doesn't allow for a total coexistence, where it's not balanced, but it's totally all these lights and all ideas coming together, which makes no sense. Chachma separates things and it creates the lines. But when a person's sleeping, and Chachma goes away, because when a person sleeps, the logic goes away, and it goes into exile. And then there's an ability, something that Alter Rebbe is getting into, is that a person may think, oh yeah, I live in Galus, which it is. We want that it should be clear. We want Hashem has to come in Shmoy Echad. It should all be one clearly. But there's some sort of positive in Galus. That's what we're going to remember Galus Hayinu Kochom, we had the ability to dream. That because when the logic comes out, although that's not a good thing, because we want the Chachma to be there and control and balance and have everything healthy. But the other side is when there's no Chachma, there's an ability to attach ourselves to the circle above. That the darkness, the choshech, where things don't have to always make sense, where there's a circle. And there, the concealment, things are not revealed. And in the darkness, it doesn't always have to make sense. Because revelation is chachma. Chachma says this is how it has to be. But then it has to be logical. And again, it's not that you have to be extreme. Actually, the job is chachma to create balance, but the healthy, logical balance. Mashiach comes. It says in Yeshaya, is no longer going to be the garments, even the garments of darkness. Then that day, everything is going to be elevated to its true essence. No longer is the circle going to have to hide itself in darkness. And then God's name will be pronounced as it's written. Today, it's either darkness, but if there's light, then it has to make sense. Mashiach comes, we're going to be elevated to such a time where even when it's revealed, we're not going to have to enclose ourselves in darkness in order to get to the circle. You can see such an essential God. That's like that simplicity. That's even beyond logic only comes into when things are starting to manifest. But at the core, it is all one. We're going to say, B'shuv Hashem Shiva Sion, and then when we come back, when the returnees of Zion come back, we're going to recognize from the source the power of the dream. We're going to recognize the contradictions, the power of the dream. Everyone's going to see, and comprehend. What were we surviving on? What kept us alive? If we didn't have the power of the dream, we would never survive Galus. because we couldn't be, we would just fall apart. Because we gravitate towards survival. And our survival requires us to have our finances in line. Our goof has to survive. There's no way we'd be able to daven if we saw things clear. And only because we were able to live in the world of imagination. We're able to find those pockets of the inconsistencies, of the dreams, of the imagination. And the imagination, although you say, well, it doesn't make sense, so what? That kept us alive. That kept us surviving. Everyone's going to recognize, v'yedu, and know, v'yesigu, and comprehend, hachayis, what kept us alive in the times of Galus, that we lived, we survived from the dream. And therefore we're going to say, we're like dreamers. And from this we're going to understand, Mailis Madregas Yaakov Yosef, the greatness of Joseph and Yaakov. That they dreamt things like that like this. Yosef dreamed, Yaakov dreamed in the beginning of Vayetze, the end of Vayetze, the sheep and the dots and the stripes, and Yosef's dreams, Yosef interpreting the dreams. And that's why there's certain ways. Yosef, which is the power of imagination, the dream, is greater than Moshe, which is the power of Chachma. Chachma is wisdom. Moshe was Torah. This is right, this is wrong. But in some ways, Yosef is higher than Moshe, because he's the power of the dream. And it says here that the sons of Aaron, who couldn't live in Moshe's world, that they sacrificed something they shouldn't have sacrificed, and they ceased to exist, ceased to live. They were the nefesh, the part of the nefesh and the part of the spirit of Joseph. And that's why it says, therefore they say, we were only tummy to the nefesh, because the nefesh comes down to this world, has to be consistent. Which was the spirit of Yosef, they didn't come tummy, because that power of the dream stayed holy. They didn't need to become pure because of touching the element of the spirit of Yosef. That the heart, the spirit of Nadav supports me. And that's why the Rebbe talked about this so much, that in the times of Galus, and that's why the Rebbe is connected to his father-in-law, which was called Yosef. Noah Katan Yosef, that we're like the sheep of Yosef in the time of Galus. Because how do we survive in the exile? And Hagis Yisrael b'chinas Yosef. We live more off the ideas of Yosef, the power of the dream, the power to get out of sometimes of the restrictions of the limitations of the lines of the logic. We can live in the world of the dream. We could survive off the circle, although it has to be hidden and it doesn't make sense. And that's why Yosef, it says Ben Parot Yosef, Ben Pairois Oisis Poiter. He's Poiter. He translates the dream. Doesn't translate it logically, but he translates that it can exist. The Toifer, and he could also, the words Poiser also means Toifer means to sew things together like a dream that combines things together. He's the one who's able to properly understand what the meaning of the dreams, because he lived in the world of the dreams. And fabulous Maamar. Thank you all for joining. Laila Tov, and see you in next class. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Welcome.